it's part of our pursuit of spiritual excellence to be a bit prepared for challenging circumstances, or maybe even some circumstances in life that might seem impossible. I have a friend, and she's in a kind of a circumstance with people who are near and dear to her, that if she does one thing, one person, group of people will be hurt and bothered by that. If she doesn't do that, then another group of people are going to be hurt and bothered by it, and eventually somebody's going to end up angry with her and upset and frustrated. It seems like a kind of an impossible situation. And if you have situations like that, maybe at home or at work, where whatever you do, it seems like it's just impossible, or it seems like there's no way out, or just no logical conclusion to how things could end right for you. Well, that's the story. That's the background of the story today in Daniel chapter 2. So I have 4 points I want to share with you quickly this morning from the text. The first is this: as we face possible challenges in life, impossible situations, face them with composure. Note what Daniel does. It says that he spoke with Arioch, pulled him aside. This is the chief executioner, and he spoke to him with wisdom and with tact. There was no heart attack, no panic attack, and they didn't, pull Arioch aside and stab him in the back. There was nothing like that. The text tells us that Daniel spoke to him with wisdom. And remember wisdom? If you missed it last week, chokhmah, the Hebrew word, it's being able to take knowledge and apply it to life. Somebody handed me a note right at the end of the service last week. I'll share it with you quickly again, because some of you weren't here. The note said, I have a perfect illustration of the difference between knowledge and wisdom. So I read the note. Knowledge is knowing that a tomato is a fruit. And a tomato is a fruit, right? It's true. That's what it's technically classified. Knowledge is knowing that a tomato is a fruit. Wisdom is knowing not to put it in a fruit salad. It says that Daniel spoke with wisdom. And wisdom, by the way, is taking knowledge and experience and actually applying it to the here and now. That's why a lot of people can get on the internet and read a lot of things, and it doesn't make them wise at all. And in fact, sometimes a little bit of knowledge is a very dangerous thing. And especially if you don't have wisdom, that is being able to take that knowledge and apply it to life. It says he spoke to him with wisdom, with tact. The Hebrew word there for tact it's often translated prudently. He spoke to him with prudence, that is, carefully, considering his words. Secondly, he faced the impossible situation and challenge with courage. Now, already he's shown some courage. I mean, he pulled Arioch aside. Remember who Arioch is? He's the slaughterer. I mean, he might have been hastening his own execution, and yet he addresses him with composure. And then he takes another courageous step and makes an appointment with the king. Now, evidently, he's at such a level that he can get an audience with King Nebuchadnezzar. But you got to ask yourself, is this the smart thing to do? Well, it's courageous. You and I, well, maybe not you so much, but I, given this set of impossible circumstances, I probably would have been hightailing it for the hills, or trying to figure out my escape route, or how am I going to get out of town? And yet he goes to the very source of the impossible situation and challenge and meets with the king. It's as if he has an appointment to go to the Oval Office to meet with the most powerful person, or the Vatican to meet with it's that level of a meeting. He goes not because he is fearless. You see, courage is not being without fear. Courage is taking the step even when fear is attempting to grip you. Courage is taking the step in spite of the fear. Challenges, and this is, if you're taking notes, I want to encourage you to write this down. Challenges don't so much make us what we are as they reveal what we are, who and what it is that we are trusting. And that's the point, isn't it? Daniel knew who to trust in the face of this impossible challenge. Third, As we face impossible challenges in life, we want to do that with companions. Notice after he meets with the king, and by the way, have you noticed that there's not a great deal of, well, there's not any detail of the conversation with the king? Have you noticed that there's not a great deal of detail even with his conversation with Arioch? There's not a great deal of detail even as he goes and he meets with his companions, except that he shares with them his burden. He shares with them the situation. He lays it out exactly the way that it is. If you're going to face impossible challenges in life, things that are really difficult, you don't want to be doing that alone. Life is not a solo sport. So he goes to Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah because he understands that life, far from being a solo sport, is best played as a team player. So the saying that you and I challenge often in our lives, no man is an island unto himself, and yet we try to behave that way, and yet we know that it doesn't really work. It's better, one person wrote, it's better to face everything with someone than to face anything with no one. Here's the key. Here's the truth. If you're taking notes or memorizing what I'm saying this morning, friends multiply our joys and they divide our grief and sorrows. Friends, when you have something that's joyful, I mean, just think about how real that is. When something really great happens in your life, like let's suppose you're out playing golf and you hit a hole in one, if it's on a Sunday morning, unless you're the pastor and you're playing hooky, if you hit a hole in one, what do? You tell everybody. You try to get the reporter out there. You want to make sure that you've been in a foursome or at least a twosome when you're hitting a hole in one, right? Because when you have a joyous experience in life, maybe you experience it by yourself, but when you go home, maybe something good happens at work, and you go home, you want to share that with somebody, right? Because it multiplies it. It doesn't diminish the joy. It's not like if you have a joyful experience, you share it with 10 people, and now you feel like, well, I'm only about, at 10% as joyful as I was before. No, you're about 100 times more joyful because you've had people patting you on the back, high-fiving you. That's fantastic. It multiplies joy. On the other end of the spectrum, friends, well, they diminish and divide the grief. It's as if when we're walking through life and pilgrims in this life are walking with us, we can take a little bit out of our knapsack and hand it to them for a little bit and say, can you help me carry this? No wonder in the New Testament Paul says that we ought to be praying for and carrying one another's griefs and sorrows and burdens. And, well, you get the picture, don't you? I mean, when you share a hard situation or a grief or a sorrow or a loss with somebody else, it's as though you've pared it down a little bit. You brought it in perspective. Well, that's the way it works for me. I'm pretty sure it's the way it works for me too. And I think we can count on it for life. So, he shares this life. He shares this impossible challenge with companions. In the book of Ecclesiastes, I think it's chapter 4. I forgot to write it in my notes, but Ecclesiastes, the writer there, and by the way, Ecclesiastes was written by Solomon, the wisest man who ever lived. And perhaps this is a truth for you and I to hear today. He says 2 are better than 1 because they have a greater return for their labor. He multiplies the productivity. He goes on to say that if one falls down, his friend can help him up. But pity the person who falls down and has no one to help him up. Pity. He goes on to say that if 2 lie down together, they will keep each other warm. The exchange of body heat and the exchange of life, they keep one another warm. And though one may be overpowered, 2 can defend themselves, standing back to back, us against the world. I mean, you got to have companions. If you're going to face impossible circumstances and challenges in life, face them with people that love you. The writer of Ecclesiastes then wraps it all up and says that a cord of 3 strands is not easily broken, so 2. And then he brings in this 3rd strand, which really leads us directly to the last point, and that is face impossible challenges with Creator God. With a God who is so big, so creative, so strong, so mighty, so caring, so loving, so interested in you. You see, God-sized challenges demand God-sized intervention in our lives. Now, I told you we'd return to this because Daniel includes it in his account there of the astrologers there in front of King Nebuchadnezzar. They say, who can solve a problem like this except the gods? And the gods do not dwell among human beings. Really? Daniel says, really? Because let me tell you, there's a tabernacle, and our God dwells in that tabernacle. That's the Old Testament. God was already at work becoming intimately involved with his people. But now you and I have a deeper and a greater and a grander insight than that. Because God comes down the staircase of heaven. And he's born in a barn in Bethlehem. And he not only dwells, he walks with his followers in the dusty roads, and he teaches them, and he shows them about love and courage and companionship and, well, how to keep your composure. And do the gods dwell among us? No, the God dwells among us. Emmanuel, God with us. And Jesus, same Jesus born in that barn, is crucified on the cross at Calvary and rises again on the third day. So that you and I might know that our God overcomes ultimately even the greatest impossible challenge.